Hello there, everyone. Interesting case today on principal residence relief, which, as most people know, is the most valuable form of capital gains tax relief available in the UK. Basically, when you sell your main residence, the house that you live in, there is no capital gains tax, and that's been the case for many decades, and I think pretty much everyone is familiar with that. But this particular example is when it can go slightly wrong, meaning you won't be able to claim main residence relief when you thought you might have done. So, but I don't want to set any alarm bells off. This is not going to be something for everyone to consider and look out for and say, oh my goodness, Simon's telling me that something that I thought was going to work doesn't. This is quite a nuanced situation, but have a think, because it could apply to some of you out there. But let's just dive straight in. So the rule is, as we've said, you sell your main residence, no capital gains tax. But actually, you can sell off part of that main residence and still get that exemption from capital gains tax. So let's say, for example, you've been living there for many years, you've got a reasonable garden, but actually, part of the garden, you get an offer from a developer to say, quite like to build a house at the bottom of your garden. How much do you want for it? If you were to sell that plot, assuming that it meets the other criteria, that your garden isn't of such a huge size that it falls beyond the capital gains tax rules in this case for exemption, which is half a hectare, or larger actually, if it's commensurate with being enjoyed for the size of the house. If you've got a stately home or a hall or something like that, you're allowed a bigger size garden. But basically, assuming it's within the realms of the rules, yes, you can sell off part of your garden, and that would be exempt from capital gains tax. So you're still in your main home, you've still got 2/3 or whatever of your original garden, you've just sold off a bit of the garden for a developer. That is free from capital gains tax. Assuming you use the garden up as a garden up to the point of sale to the developer, and you had no pre-existing plans. When I say pre-existing, I mean at the time of buying the property to begin with, that's what you were going to do. You were going to have a commercial view to make a few quid on doing a deal with the land that your main residence is situated on. Now, this is basically the thrust of this court case that I'm going to tell you about, which happened where a woman bought quite a large home. It was like a stately home, for want of a better phrase, and she couldn't really afford to buy it. So the English Heritage Society, they said, look, we're going to grant you permission that you can sell off 6 building plots on the land, which is going to help, pay off the loan that you're going to need to, or the bridging loan, whatever, however she financed it. It was a lot of money. We're going to do you a favour, grant you permissions, you can sell off 6 plots to enable you to afford this thing in the first place. So she acquired this hall to live in as a main residence. It had a big garden, but even so, the garden, like I said, it was commensurate with the size of the house. Yes, it was more than half the hectare, but like capital gains tax rule says, if you've got a big enough house, that half a hectare is increased, so you can have reasonable grounds to enjoy your garden based on the size of the house. So that all fitted fine. She sold the 6 plots, made a few quid from that, which helped her finance the loan to begin with to buy this hall, this stately home, and put on her capital gains tax return that the sale of these 6 plots counted for main residence relief, so no capital gains tax. HMRC challenged that and said, no, you can't have main residence relief because of the following reasons. Firstly, there was an intention all along to have there was a view to realization of profit, as they say in the tax world. A view to realization of profit all triggers towards an income tax play, not a capital gains tax play. This was always part of the plan to make a few quid by selling off the plots. That was the intention before she even moved in and bought the whole building and grounds. So that was the first thing. The second was that actually, before she'd even sold these plots, there was a lot of groundwork and preparations done in the garden. It wasn't used as a garden up to the point of selling off. There was a whole lot of preparatory stuff going on, which in HMRC's and the court's case, this is called, it was denatured what the grounds were. So it wasn't a garden, it was a building site. And so the combination of the intention all along and the state of the garden before it was sold off, they denied her that main residence relief on the sale of those plots. And they said, actually, technically what it is, you've got an appropriation, which means a movement between capital stock and trading stock. Now, this happens elsewhere in the tax world. Basically, it means when you've got an asset which is on your balance sheet as an investment, and all of a sudden you decide you're not going to hang on to it long term, but you're going to trade it, you're going to sell it. You have an appropriation from capital stock to trading stock. In other words, it moves from your balance sheet to your profit and loss account. So HMRC said, look, in this case, this is what's happening. So let's take an argument, let's take an example of some figures on this. So let's say you've got something you've bought for 500 and it's on your balance sheet for 700. Okay? So that is a latent gain of 200. When you appropriate it into stock, that gain is realized. So all of a sudden it goes into your stock for 700, it cost you 500. That's a 200 gain right there. And then once it's in your stock at 700, any future uplift is subject to income tax as opposed to capital gains tax. So you buy it for 500, you sell it to yourself from capital to stock at 700, 200 capital gain there, and then let's say you sell it in quick succession for 1,000. Well, that 300 uplift from 700 to 1,000 is taxed as income tax. So buy for 500, move across at 700, sell at 1,000. Overall, 500 uplift, 200 taxed as capital, 300 taxed as income tax. That's what an appropriation into trading stock means. So in this case, HMRC said that's what happened, but that appropriation from capital to income, that is subject to capital gains tax without the exemption of main residence relief. And that's what the taxpayer was claiming all along. HMRC said, no, you've got to pay your capital gain at that point, and then further down the line on those plots, they will be subject to income tax. So just a cautionary tale there on where it can go wrong if you are thinking about selling off part of your garden to a developer and expecting to get zero capital gains tax to take advantage of the main residence relief. So, like I said, tips to follow from that court case. It's all about the intention all along. If it was all a predetermined idea to buy a piece of land with a house with a view to selling off in quick succession, that you potentially that's an income tax play. Well, like I said, a capital gain, but with no exemption, then turned into an income tax play on that appropriation to trading stock. And then what you do with the ground and starting commencing the works before you've even done the deal. So, something to think about if you're in that situation. I would say the vast majority of people, though, who do flog a bit of land at the bottom of their garden, it's mostly they've had it for years, they've lived in it for years, and then decided to sell. I would suggest most people do not go into buying their main residence in the first place with a view to ultimately selling something in quick succession. Normally, like I said, it would happen many years down the line, and all the arguments would point towards it just being an idea that you've had, wasn't a predisposed idea when you moved in, and it wasn't a sort of a commercial operation to begin with. It was just a bit of speculation that you thought you'd make a few quid on offloading a bit of your garden. But do think about this, though. If you are in a situation where you get an offer for your property, give it some serious thought, especially if you've just moved in, because quite generally you might have had no idea, no intention of selling off any of the garden, and then all of a sudden someone comes along and says, I want to buy a bit of that. How do you prove that there was no intention to sell anything off right from the get-go if it's within quick succession of you moving in the first place? So all these things you've got to think about, and they all hinge in the fact. It all hinges on the fact, and if you can show that there was no commercial ramification, you weren't in the business of making turn on selling off parts of your property to begin with, then you should be all right. But anyway, like I said, something to think about, food for thought there. Well, if you like that video, please do subscribe right there, and I'll see you soon.